She's the founder of the Energy 45 Fund and the chief of staff for the EPA in America, Mandy Gunasekara.
That was really good.
Okay. Was it close?
It's Gunasekara.
Gunasekara.
Yeah.
Okay, good. See, now I know.
You were there.
See, here's what you should have done, which is what I told you in the green room. Hi, Mandy. And she would have said, yeah. And then she would have pronounced it and would have been done with it.
Well, see, the problem is in the green room, I saw your lips moving, but I wasn't really listening.
Wah, 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 wah.
Exactly. It was the Charlie Brown parent off to the side. That's the way it is. Mandy, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm very excited to be here.
I am excited to have you in the studio. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I figured you'd be in Washington.
Well, I go back and forth between Mississippi and Washington. I've been back home since Sunday,
Nice.
And it feels so good to be down here and be with my family, be with my kids, and be with people who are a lot closer to sanity and common sense.
Well, I was going to say you're almost giving me the impression that Washington is full of a bunch of loonies.
It can be, there's folks like myself and a lot of folks working in the president's administration trying to change Washington. So it reflects of the will of the people outside of that city. And we go to work every day with that mission in our hearts and trying to implement that effort. But it's always good to get out here and just, be around family, go to church, and be in Decatur, Mississippi, which is also known as God's country. I don't know if y'all knew that, but it is.
I think they should put that on the city limit sign,
I
shouldn't
think
they?
so,
Yeah.
too.
It's got to feel like being a part of the Trump administration in Washington, D.C., do you just have this constant feeling of being surrounded by the enemy on all sides?
It's interesting that you asked that because I previously, before I worked in the administration, I worked in the Senate and the House of Representatives, but most recently in the U.S. Senate. And when you're in the U.S. Senate, when you walk into a room, you know who generally supports where you are and where you're going. It's well known. When you go into some of the agencies, there's those that stand behind a smile, but they're really proverbially stabbing you in the back. So yeah, there are a lot of forces. Exactly. Thank you, Perez. But yeah, I think that's why it's important for the core of us that are there for the president and to help implement his vision for a brighter future in this country, that we all stick together and we all know each other really, really well and have each other's backs. Because if we don't have each other's backs, there's a lot of other people out there trying to make us look bad and make the president look bad.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. That's why I asked that question. It's got to lead to a very strong sense of camaraderie and cohesiveness amongst the administration officials that are on the same page. Whereas in previous administrations, there could be some wiggle room, some back and forth, yeah, we're together except on this. But
yeah.
It seems like right now in the current climate and the way things are in Washington and in the country, you guys just have to be completely on board with one another.
We do. And, I don't want to give the false sense that it's easy going with all the politicals. We obviously have disagreements of how we go about achieving certain outcomes. My relative area of expertise is in advancing environmental protection and public health. There's a lot of nuance to that. And, there's my fellow, I call them Trumplicans, that we have our different approaches to how we should achieve that. And we debate back and forth. But at the end of the day, we know that we're all on the same page to trying to clean up the air, clean up the water, ensure that communities are living next to healthy lands, and we can set aside differences in terms of legal risk or different metrics that may come out in another way. We can set aside disagreements on that and make sure at the end of the day we are in fact achieving those really important outcomes for the president and for this country.
And the thing to remember, I would think, at all times is it doesn't matter what you do or what you say. A large part of the media is going to figure out a way to use it to attack you.
That's true. As I was driving in this morning, I was just thinking about what's going on in the world and our conversation, obviously, what we'd be talking about. And I would just say it's pretty consistently the case that the national news cycle doesn't really reflect what is very good work and very good, meaningful conversations going on within the administration, at the White House, at the Environmental Protection Agency, at the Department of Interior, and on Capitol Hill. And we're all talking to one another. The news cycle is all about clickbait and getting people's blood pressure to raise up a couple levels or to rise up a couple levels. And that is not really accurate of what's going on the ground. So I know folks, folks can get very upset listening to that all day, but they can know in their heart and know in their soul that there's folks working in very collaborative, constructive ways to make this country better.
And that's the problem to me, is that the entire precept of if it bleeds, it leads has taken over everything. The bad news is no longer tempered with good news. It's all bad. 24/7.
Yeah.
And that's not the case with anything, anywhere. So that immediately tips you off, oh, there's something up here. The fix is in on this kind of thing, because you guys are doing good work. As a matter of fact, in the EPA under the Trump administration, it's probably been one of the best, if not the best, administrations for the environment that we've had.
It is. I'm so glad you brought that up, because we have a very good news story to tell, especially when it comes to advancing environmental progress. The administrator was on a radio show. It was either yesterday or the day before, but he made a very accurate and declarative statement that the outcomes we've achieved in this administration for 3.5 years far exceeded the outcomes that were achieved in all 8 years of the last administration. And we can talk about any of the data. If you're talking about air quality, our air quality relative emissions and how we measure that, it's gone down 7% in the first 3.5 years in this administration. When it comes to once contaminated sites, they usually fall into categories of either Superfund sites or brownfield sites. We've been investing hundreds of millions of dollars to revamp these sites all over the country, and there's something called the National Priority List, which is the worst of the worst. In this administration, we have deleted more sites off of that than all 8 years of the last administration combined. And what that means when a site is taken off that list for the communities that live in or around those areas, that area can be re-entered for economic opportunity. People can move back in and feel safe, know that they're not exposed to any harmful toxins. And so it really is life-changing. And that's what we've done at EPA. We've taken the important mission of EPA, which had been co-opted by the last administration to achieve political gains. We have refocused it to the core mission. So we are moving the ball in tangible ways that impact people today. And we have a lot to be proud of. And we did that because of the courage of the president and of President Trump and his ability to turn an important mission back to what it's supposed to be doing. And that's helping the lives of people today and helping improve the environment.
Well, it's not discussed very often in the national media, not at all. But that's kind of par for the course. That's kind of the way the president seems to have been operating. He just doesn't get the credit for it. There's been a lot of things that have been paid a lot of lip service over the years by a lot of people, and instead he's just doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was, let's go back to 2016 and 2017. He ran on a platform. And as soon as he came in, I officially joined the administration in March of 2017. I'd been at the Senate. I got the nominee, then was former Administrator Scott Pruitt, through the Senate committee that I worked at. Got his nomination through that committee and then joined the administration. And from the very start, it was, okay, this is what the president promised he was going to do to the American people. Now we're actually going to do it. And you wouldn't believe how difficult that actually is in a place like Washington, D.C., where people are used to politicians that say one thing, and then when they get within or take hold of the helm of power, so to speak, they do something different because it's easier, but not this president. And we've been all working very hard and very diligently for him to be able to keep his promises to the American people.
My other question is, for right now, and we'll continue after the break, have you tasted any of Pelosi's ice cream? Is it any good? Do we know? We can talk about it after the break.
Yeah, let's start with that.
I'm just curious. I can't tell by looking at it if it's any good or not. You don't know.
You don't know. You really don't know.
She could have just repackaged some great value, but we both know that's not true.
That's probably not true.
We'll continue talking with Mandy. There, you happy, Perez? I just called her Mandy this time. See, Mandy
Gunasekara.
There we go.
That was perfect.
Yeah, I did so well that time.
You really did.
That's fantastic. I know you get that all the time.
I do.
Well, is that Greek? What is that?
No, it's Sri Lankan. So
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
my husband, his father was from Sri Lanka, and if you go to Sri Lanka, which is a tiny little island nation off the coast of southern India, it's actually it's a known Sri Lankan name. So I went there a couple of years ago, and I had my passport. You know, they're checking me in, and I used to always get triple takes. How did you? I look like an Irish girl. How do you have this Sri Lankan last name? And so anyway, it's my husband.
And your answer to them always is, I married the right guy.
I did. I met him at Ole Miss. So, knew he's a Colorado man, but he came over to Mississippi as soon as he could, and he adopted a whole family.
So a Sri Lanka guy from Colorado came to Ole Miss, and you met him, and you got married.
Yeah, that's it. That's how I got the last name.
This is a whole story in and of itself. I love this. This is great. Now, right before we took the break, I mentioned it. Come back. Seriously, have you tried Pelosi's ice cream? Is it any good? Is it still frozen? I'm worried about her.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would say sometimes the appearances she puts out to the public aren't always consistent with what's behind the scenes. So I have not tried it, nor do I necessarily want to. I didn't see any Mississippi State ice cream in her freezer, and that is my preferred type.
Well, what I think we should have seen when she opened up her $20,000 Autobot fridge, if there'd have been a ball of Edam cheese in there, maybe that would have carried a little weight. But
yeah,
no.
I think that could have been a saving grace for her.
That's beneath her, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Just ask her. You know how that works. Let's talk about something here that is near and dear to us in Mississippi that the EPA does have a hand in, and that's the pumps in the Delta.
Yes,
we got to get these things in, Mandy.
Yeah, we absolutely do, and there's a long, convoluted story to that, and it's been caught up in a legal morass in the permitting space. And unfortunately, the impact of that has been devastating to people and livelihoods in the Delta. And so what we've got going right now is we've got good momentum from Capitol Hill. Senator Hyde-Smith and Senator Wicker have been very forward on this issue in trying to ensure that EPA stays on top of looking at this. We at EPA, and mostly through our Region 4 office, so our Region 4 is based in Atlanta, we've got a really good head of that office, a woman named Mary Walker. I know she's been out to the Delta and been working with the different constituencies impacted, but working with them to make sure that this path we laid out before us, which is a path to get those pumps, that it is done consistent with legal expectations and permitting requirements. And that's exactly what we're doing. We have created a path for a new opportunity, and it is underway. I believe it was either later last week or earlier this week. EPA's role in this, because this is a joint project between the Army Corps and EPA, we provide comments on the newly proposed project, which is new, to be considerate of environmental and ecological and wildlife impacts. We provide comments on what we believe is good and balanced in that context. So we will be submitting those. If we haven't already, I lose some of the timelines. There's a lot of different timelines in my head, but if we haven't submitted them already, they will be going over relatively soon. I think because we put it out on the JT show earlier this week. I think it was Monday was the deadline for public comment. Yes, certainly. This is a thing, and one thing that you mentioned there is a joint project with the Army Corps of Engineers. Has this been a case of too many chefs? Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think you could say that about a lot of regulatory actions, especially permitting actions, that linger for years and years, which has certainly been the case here. I think it's also, this shows an instance where ideas and influences outside of the area that's actually impacted overtook the consideration of this permit for how it impacts the people in that area, the farms in that area, the wildlife in that area. When you take a look at the local impacts, again, creating this pathway for the pumps is essentially a no-brainer. But if you get wrapped up in larger conversations, it becomes susceptible to influences that are generated outside of Mississippi. that can stall these projects. And that's what you see with a lot of environmental groups. They do this in a number of different ways. Unfortunately, years ago, they made the Mississippi pumps. They put that at the top of their list of things to try to bog down through the permitting landscape and regulatory requirements. They've been successful up until this point, but again, I think we have really good momentum. We are dotting our I's and crossing our T's at the agency and trying to get this to the right outcome.
Well, and exactly, and the example I have given forever, somebody is immediately going to pop up and say, well, this will impact the habitat of the naked bald screech owl. We can't do this. Got somebody on the C Spire text line, Tim from Tupelo, texted in and said, thank Trump for getting rid of all of those crazy rules where a landowner can't even build a lake on their own property the way it was under President Obama. One of my friends was building a lake on his property in 2012, and the EPA stopped him because a creek was close to where he was building the lake. It didn't join, they didn't connect, but there was a creek over there, and they said, oh, that would harm the natural creek. You can't build a lake on your own property. And that's one thing that has been a hallmark of the Trump administration and the EPA and elsewhere. A lot of regulations have just kind of gone away.
Yeah, and it's been done in a very thoughtful, deliberative, and data-driven manner. At EPA under this administration, we have reduced regulations. We've taken 63 regulations off the book that represent $10 billion of money that the regulated community, whether it's your farmers, whether it's your manufacturers, your small businesses, they're spending that $10 billion across the entire United States, investing in what they do and in their people, instead of sending that money to Washington, D.C., that is then invested in a bureaucracy that does more to complicate people's lives than to actually address tangible issues. So again, that goes back to our focus on the core mission of the agency, which is to advance public health and the environment. The last administration used that mission as a means to expand federal control. And what the gentleman who texted in from Tupelo was referring to, there was a rule called the Waters of the United States. And that was one of the largest attempts to expand federal control by arguing if you were trying to build a pond or a lake or a ditch through your personal property, and if it could potentially join up with what they defined as a water of the United States, then you had to have approval by EPA first before you could do that. Now, we recently, we repealed that rule and we replaced it with something called the Navigable Waters Protection Act. And navigable waters is the qualifying term because that is the statutory term in the law, that if you are close to a navigable water, which is a larger body of water, then you do need to talk to EPA to ensure you don't negatively impact water quality. But that certainly isn't the case when you're talking about lakes, ponds, and puddles on people's personal property. So there's a balance there, and we found it in this administration.
Well, and especially with what he's talking about here, saying a creek, that's what, 6 inches deep, maybe a foot deep. That's not navigable. You just walk through it. So that's the kind of thing that government should stay out of. Keep your nose off of my land. I think is the attitude.
No, certainly, and I think there's also the recognition that landowners, and we have this conversation with farmers all the time too. They are the original conservationists. Their land is their livelihood, and so the EPA or any federal entity coming in and saying, this land may have been in your family for hundreds of years, but we know how to take care of it better than you. Well, that just doesn't sit right with people, and it's not accurate. Now, there is a balance. EPA can provide resources to ensure and provide guidance that actions you are taking don't negatively impact those around you. But again, it's all about a balance, which is harder to do. It's more work. But that's exactly what we've been doing from day one in this administration.
Very quickly from the text line, Lee in Canton, could you ask Mandy if the EPA plans to reauthorize the use of MSMA herbicide on residential and commercial lawns? You might not know that one off the top of your head.
I don't. But I would love for Lee to reach out to me. Tell her to send me a note via Twitter, a direct message via Twitter, and I'll connect her with our pesticide folks to get her an answer.
Just send it to you or to the EPA?
She can send at Mississippi MG is my Twitter handle.
Okay.
Have her send it to me, and I'll connect her to the right folks.
Fantastic. Mandy, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I enjoyed this. You come back anytime.
I will. Thank you so much for having me.
From now on, I'll listen to Perez and you and just let you say your last
Well,
name.
you already said it perfectly. Gunasekara.
Well, I said it perfectly once. I'm claiming no credit for that whatsoever. You have a good day. Keep us updated on what's going on. Okay?
I will. I'll be back for sure.
Try not to let the whack jobs in Washington get to you.
No, I'm from Mississippi, so I'll always be grounded.
I like it. Great attitude.